about ready here. Gotta make sure I make it look as good as possible.
Oh,
I
goodness.
don't want anybody yelling at me.
We're going to be here all day.
All right, look about right here for me.
Okay.
Okay, because that's where I'm gonna be sitting, so that's where I want your focus.
I've been trying to think of stuff that you would be interested in for this documentary. You know, I can tell you hundreds of things about the spooky gunship and the mission and all that stuff, but not a lot about the other.
Well, all that sounds good to me. I want to understand, you know, what you did over there, and then obviously with an emphasis on any of the missions you flew over to Cape. So, why don't we, let's see, if you could just, when I put you on camera, I'm going to put your name, then I'll put your rank and the unit you were with in Vietnam. So why don't you tell me how you'd like to see that?
Okay.
So you can go ahead and do that now.
My name is Al Dykes. I was in Vietnam in 1969 in the 4th Special Operations Squadron out of Nha Trang, Vietnam.
Okay, good. I'm just adjusting some audio here. Could you say that one more time, just so
Okay.
now that I've got it reset?
My name is Al Dykes. I was in Vietnam in 1969 in the 4th Special Operations Group squadron there, which was the AC-47 Spooky gunship.
And was that, hang on one second, I gotta turn up the light here just a little bit. Okay, and now since you say gunship, were you Air Force or what?
I was Air Force, navigator in the Air Force, and the Spooky gunship was an old, came out in the early 1930s. The AC, not the AC, but the C-47-1, I guess you would call it. The first model was about 1933. The C-47 came out in, I believe it was 1935. And here we were in '69 using old World War II and pre-World War II airplanes to fly a mission in combat. So it was quite a challenge in a way. The way that Spooky got started was there's a group of people at the Pentagon sitting around a table, some officers up there, and they were trying to discuss and come up with a new type weapon system. And one young fellow, one captain there, said he could take any airplane in the Air Force and make a weapon system out of it. And everybody kind of laughed, yeah, right. And he said, what airplane do you want me to have? They said a C-47. And they said, now explain how you're going to make a military type weapon out of that. This guy had spent some time in South America, and he'd flown with one of the local pilots in a small light airplane that would go out to the villages and deliver mail and medicine and pick up mail and stuff. They would get over a village and they would let a rope out with a bucket on the end of it. And when the guy would fly in a circle, that bucket would stay in one spot on the ground. And they'd go over and get their medicines and stuff out and put their mail in there, whatever they had. And they'd pull the rope up and take off to the next village. His idea was to put guns on the side of that C-47 and let it fly in a circle, and that way the bullets would stay in one area and you could move them around any way you want to. And that got the C-47, the AC-47 Spooky started. The name came from, after they got the system, they said, we need a name for that, because we started out with Project Phyllis Sand when we designed it. And one of the guys sitting there says, man, that sounds like a spooky mission. And they said, yeah, spooky's the call sign for it.
Yeah, okay.
And when we closed down the Spookies in Vietnam, they gave our call sign out here to Hurlburt, to the C-130s, the AC-130 gunships. So the Spooky name is still around.
So the Spooky gunships, how many men were on board?
We had 2 pilots, an engineer, navigator, 1 loadmaster, and 2 gunners. And the plane had 3 guns, mini guns on it, Gatling type guns. We were able to shoot at fast fire. If all 3 guns were firing, we could fire 18,000 rounds a minute. If we put them on slow fire, we could fire 3,000 per gun per minute. Usually when we got into a target like over Kate, if it was really hot that night, we might put all 3 guns on the line for a couple of passes around the area where Hawk wanted to fire laid down. Then we'd go to 2 guns. So we always kept 1 gun with ammo. When the other 2 would run out, we still had a gun that we could use for firing. We would also, once we cooled a target down, any target, we would go to slow fire, which was half speed, 3,000 per target, per gun. So we conserved our energy in that way. With that old Goonie bird, you could stay with them all night long.
And so the guns, were they mounted?
They were
permanently?
mounted on the left side of the airplane. Initially, the first airplanes, they had 1 in the door. In the first 2 windows forward of the door, they had 1 in each window. They were great big Gatling guns. They were, this long,
Okay.
sitting in there. We finally got the small Gatling guns that I'll show you a picture of later that were smaller. And we moved the 3rd gun up into the 3 windows just in front of the door. And we always flew with the door because we carried flares. And we would, if Hawk, for example, wanted some light on an area, we could drop a flare over that area. It'd come down in a parachute and illuminate for so long. We use that to help us identify targets. The Gatlings were mounted, but they were depressed about 12 degrees or so. That way, when we flew in a circle, we went 30 degrees. That 12 gave us nearly a 45 degree, which made it easier on the circles that we were making for firing.
So as far as hitting your target, these were mounted at certain angles so the plane would be adjusted? Or?
All 3 were rigidly mounted at the same depression.
Okay.
And the pilot had a kind of a gun sight. I'll show you a picture later. It was a crude thing, but he'd roll it up, put that gun sight on the thing. I'm sitting behind him at the nav station, looking out a little tiny window, and I had a little pipper on my window, and I'd say, "You're on target." Then he was cleared to fire. And we could walk that thing like crazy. You could just walk that trail around any target you wanted.
And when did you fly most of your missions? Not during the day, right?
No, we found out early on, so many of our planes were getting shot up pretty bad, that the daytime was no fun, because our targets were at 25, we would fly at 2,500 to 3,000 feet. A good 22 rifle hit that distance. And so we went to flying only at night. Also, we never went to a target before dark, and we were required to be back at home station, over home station, at sunrise. Just so we were more, might call it safe. We didn't get shot up as bad.
Right. So you would fly all night.
Oh, yeah.
So how many hours are you out there?
Well, let's see, probably about 8 to 10.
Okay.
Some nights a little bit longer.
Okay.
but we could stay with them. We didn't constantly fire like at Kate. Old Charlie, the VC, they knew the sound of that Goonie bird, and we quelled and quieted down a lot of targets just by showing up without even firing a bullet. But Kate was not that way. Kate was hot all the time. So.
And where did you fly out of? Where was your?
Initially, we were my squadron. We had 4 units, you might call it, in the 4th. One was at Da Nang, down at Saigon. One was at Nha Trang, that's where I was the headquarters for the 4th. One was at Pleiku, and one was at Da Nang. Tan Son Nhut is where that first other one was.
Okay.
So we had 4 units that we covered. All 4 sections of the whole of Vietnam we covered.
Okay. Let's step back training.
Okay.
How you got into the military and how you wound up into Vietnam.
Okay. I got into the military when I was in Denver, Colorado. I was going to the University of Denver, and I was working part-time. And I got a notice from South Carolina where I had registered, signed up initially, saying you're no longer a student. And I went down to the recruiting office. I said, tell me. I said, I'm in school. I'm taking 1, 2, sometimes 3 courses, and I'm working part-time. They said, if you don't take 12 hours, you're not a student. So I said, whoa, because then I got a call from the Army saying, we want you to report at a certain time. And I said, no, I don't want the Army. So I signed up with the Air Force, and I stayed there till they called me in, and went to Waco, Texas, and became a navigator. The only military program for flying was open at that time was navigation. They had so many pilots and stuff that's the only one available. And I said, I'll take it as long as it's flying. I don't want a desk job at all. So that was how I got in to the service. Went through nav school, and they selected me to remain at nav school as an instructor. And I remained there, and after a couple of 3 years, they shipped me to California. I didn't like the way they were teaching out there, and I found out through the grapevine there was a special volunteer program that was available. And after a week or 2 of searching, I finally found somebody that knew about it. And I volunteered, and we spent 16 days in California when we hooked the car up again and went back to the east to Alexandria, Louisiana. And we were at England Air Force Base there. We walked in the base there, and they showed us where we were going to be. It was one big, long building. It was empty except for some long tables and chairs and a few portable petitions. They said, you got 2 weeks to come up with a program to train crews to go to Vietnam. And so for 2 weeks, we were writing lesson plans. We were flying the Goonie bird, getting used to it, getting ready for those first crews that came in. And I remained there as an instructor till '69 when I got orders to go to Vietnam.
Okay. So when you first shipped out to Vietnam, where were you stationed?
I went from Alexandria, Louisiana to Nha Trang, Vietnam.
Okay.
And that was where I stayed. Towards the end, about 4 or 5 months before we closed down, we moved down to Phan Rang, which was down around a big curve there on the east coast of Vietnam. And so our final destination was down there. We closed down the 4th, and the spooky gunships, the 30th of November was our last flight.
Okay. And this is 1969.
1969.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your daily routine. How are you flying daily, or well, I know you flew at night, but is it an everyday occurrence, or?
We always had one airplane, either flying cap we called it, which means he would take off at dark and he would fly around the train till he got a call. We also had a crew on alert in case we needed another one. And this was a normal routine, and I didn't fly every night, but the night you didn't fly, you stayed up all night and then slept in the daytime because you didn't want to get out of the routine.
Right.
So that was our system at that time.
So tell me then, how did you, I guess when was the first time you flew over Cape?
28th of November, 1969.
And tell me a little bit about how that came about.
I don't remember if I was on cap or just on alert or something. We got a call anyway from our controller and gave me the coordinates, and I plotted them, and I didn't realize at the time it was going to be Kate. And they called it a TIC, Troops in Contact, which means the good guys had made contact with the bad guys. And so we took off over to Kate and came in and kind of got a short briefing from Hawk. I called him Hawk all the time, of course, because that was his call sign. But Bill, as you know him. And it was pretty hot that night. We fired a few rounds and quietened things down a little bit, and stayed with him all night till we ran out. We got home just at sunrise. And there was something, sorry. There was something about that night. I don't know what. But I went into the ops center and I told the guy in there, I said, I'm going to Kate every night. I'm flying. And that's the way it was. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I've heard the transcript, the radio transcript that you sent to Bill, and I
Yeah.
could hear, I was gonna ask you about, it seemed to be a immediate connection.
It was, sure was.
What was, any idea what that was?
I don't know, really. When I was a kid, I lived at a place in Attala, Alabama that used to be an old army base, but they tore down all the buildings. And we had a place out there, and hawks, every time you go out the door, you'd see 4 or 5 hawks. And that became my favorite bird. And I guess it was hearing hawk, and I didn't realize at the time, brought all that back. I'll be with you in a minute. But she painted me a picture of a red-tailed hawk because I like that bird. And it's on my wall back there. And one day I was looking at it and I saw that and I knew what the connection was. I just felt sorry for those guys.
Well, it was certainly intense, and I could hear that in the conversation, and I could hear, for me, hearing that, to hear the calmness in your voice as you were talking to Bill on the ground, and you could hear how much it meant to him that you guys were in the air.
Well, my theory was the whole time is I couldn't let those guys know I was uptight or anything. So I cracked jokes with them sometimes. One night we was firing for Bill, and I called him up and I said, Hawk, I need some help. He said, what you need? I said, would you walk outside and see if my bullets are hitting the ground? And he was nearly out the door when the rest of the guys stopped him. He still remembers that too.
I remember hearing that on that transcript.
But the calmer I talked to them, the calmer I could hear them come back at me. So it was a roundabout way of letting them know we didn't think things were bad enough that they would never get out. We felt like they were good. We was planning on getting them out. The spooky gunship had such a record. We're over 6,000, around 6,300 targets we were called on to defend. Any target that we got to, and there was somebody alive, we got them out alive. 100% success rate. I doubt you'll find anybody in the military with a 100% success rate like that was.
Wow, that's incredible.
But the guys that flew the Spookies just would not give up. It was just not in our blood. We had a mission, and that was what we was going to do. So.
Now, after that first night that you flew over Cape, that's the night that you came back and said,
I'm flying forever, yeah.
And that was granted. You were able to go back?
Yeah, I went every night for 3 nights till they evacuated Cape. They started the night of the 29th, and it went on into the morning of the 1st of December, evacuating the E&E, as we call it, invasion evacuation, through the thing. And we stayed with them as long as we could, and we ran out of ammo. And we got another gunship, I believe it was an AC-119, came in, replaced us, and continued to escort them till they got into the clear. So.
Okay, so they had some gunship support on that E&E?
Oh yeah, we with them as long as we could stay with them.
Okay.
And then the 119 came in and replaced us. He was actually above us till we ran out, and then he came down and replaced us. So
Okay.
they had support.
So on that, once they've left the base and you're flying at night, how are you able to track where they are or where to lay down those support without hitting them?
We would get into their area, and we'd try to get them to describe their location a little bit. We had flares that we carried, 48 flares, I believe, that had little parachutes in the bottom and back of them, and they would float down and for quite a while, and we would come in, we'd drop a flare, and we'd say, what direction are you from that flare?
Okay.
And they would identify it. We had then a ground marker, which would burn for a long time. It would go down, hit the ground, and just sit there and burn that we could see. And so we'd start marking it. Occasionally, we'd mark with a ground marker. And the guy'd say, we're 100 meters to the northeast of that ground marker. And so we knew where we could shoot. We were cautious we would work in. Like at Kate was a knoll, you might call it, just kind of by itself, like a small hill. And there was hills here and hills here and hills here. Nothing was on Kate green-wise. It was dirt because they'd taken so much incoming, and their guns were there and everything else. And so we would come in, we could nearly see, on a bright night, we could see kind of a light color. We knew where Kate was, so we knew where the good guys were. And it was not hard working for them.
When I heard a little bit of this, how Bill would direct you where to fire.
Yeah.
Was it just, was that how you found out, just communication there? Would they light off flares, or how would they let you know?
They just say, we get some noise to our November position about 100 yards out. We knew where that was.
Okay.
We'd fire.
Okay.
And Bill and his other guys there would direct us. They'd say, okay, you're looking good on that, but move that a little bit to the west, 50 yards. Because they could hear them out there, and they knew, and they were moving. They could direct us to where they saw them. But they were totally surrounded, like 2,000 VCs sitting out there. You could fire in nearly any direction and hit them. So it was one of those deals.
So you went there 3 nights.
Yep.
As those days went by, and I know on the ground it was becoming apparent to them they just couldn't stay there, but they
Right.
were requesting and being denied permission to leave.
Right.
Were you aware of that at all, that they were told not to leave?
Not till that last night when Hawks told me that they had packed up what they could, and they were E&E and out of that area. That was the first I knew of it.
Okay, but did you know before then that they had wanted to leave but were denied permission?
No,
Okay.
didn't know any of that.
Okay. Because I'm just wondering if there, you know, what if anything was the sense, I know you said, hey, you're always confident that you were getting these guys out of there. I'm assuming on the ground, they were beginning to wonder, you know, we're being denied permission to leave. How,
Yeah.
you know, how's this gonna end?
No,
But-
only Bill would know that.
Okay,
So,
all right.
yeah.
All right. So you were with them then that night of the E&E,
Mm-hmm.
up until a certain point, then you left,
Yeah.
another ship came in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess where were you when you found out, you know, if they had made it or not?
I can't remember exactly how I heard it. But when I got back to the base that night, which was the morning of the 1st of December, we didn't fly anymore. That was it for the Spookies. 30th of November was our cutoff, our closed shop type deal. And I don't know where I heard it. I don't know. I had gotten sometime along the line, I had gotten where Bill was headquartered out of, and I sent him a tape and I think a spooky pen and stuff down there, but I didn't know if he got it. I think he got it. I know that. I talked to him, but I hadn't talked to him for 45 years until just this past year when I ran in and met him over here in Panama City.
Okay.
And but if I would have been over there if Kate was still operational and we had not closed down, I would have been over there the 1st of December, the 2nd of December, the 3rd, whenever they needed us, I would have been there, because they put me down as a permanent navigator to go to Kate, and it was that easy.
And so the tape of the radio traffic that I heard, you sent that to him just days after that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
thought that was something maybe afterwards came later.
No, I sent it to him while I was in Vietnam.
Okay.
So it wasn't, but maybe a week or so. We were required on our missions to record every transmission on a recording, and sitting on my little navigation desk there, we kept a recorder. If a call came in, we mashed a button, we recorded it. If we talked to somebody, we mashed a button and recorded it. I sent him one of those tapes one of those nights I was over there. So.
And there was one point on that tape where Bill asks you who's taking the most heat in Vietnam, or where's the most action. Do you remember that?
Don't remember that, no.
You told him you guys are it.
I know they were it, yeah.
Was it that exceptional, what was happening?
Yeah, it sure was. We usually got called on small groups, our outpost, and an outpost was, they had walls. Kate didn't have any walls. They were bare. We got calls for reconnaissance teams, 5 or 6 guys. We get called from an outpost thing. Those outposts were usually triangular shaped. And those were the main type targets that we got on. But Kate was different. And it was wide open there. I mean, the guys were exposed all the time. It was not a big area. And they were all around them. It was bad news.
Now I'm going to use a term I think is kind of overused, but is there a hero in this scenario?
Bill.
And why do you say that?
For as young as he was, and for the number of people he had, and to handle that situation in such a manner that he got them out. He put himself in harm's way a couple of times on that E&E. He didn't send somebody up ahead to check on something that they might have heard. Bill went. He was the hero of that deal, for sure.
I could make an argument that the spooky gunship was a hero in that scenario as well.
We don't consider that was what we did, and it wasn't anything special for us because we had planned to get them out before we even got there, and we got them out, and that was the only thing that counted. So.
And so you never met Bill until 45 years later,
Mm-hmm.
which seems difficult since there was obvious connection between you at that time through such a horrific event.
Yeah.
And then for so much time to pass. Then how'd that meeting come about?
It's very strange. My daddy was in the Air Force. He was out here at Eglin as the chief of maintenance. And of course, he had a secretary. And being chief of maintenance, different people or different companies would send him magazines. He retired, and then his secretary retired, but she still got some of those magazines. And one of the magazines had in the back portion there says, does anybody know where Al Dykes is? Have him call this number, which was Senator or Governor of Illinois, or Ken Moffitt. His number was there. Have him call this. Well, she looked me up in the phone book, or looked up Al or Dykes. She called and she said, was your daddy Marion Dykes at Eglin? I said, yes. And so she told me about that. I sat around for a day or two and I said, do I want to call that? I'll be in trouble. Somebody's after me. And I finally called and talked to Ken. And I said, Ken, this is Al Dykes. He started laughing. He must have laughed and hollered for 5 minutes. He says, we've been trying for over a year to find you. And he said, we are trying to get Bill a Medal of Honor. He said, we want to talk to you. And I said, okay. And he said, we called Gadsden, Alabama, and they went through all their records. They had no contact with or knew of Al Dykes or Marion Dykes. And I said, how did you get that? He said, well, on that tape, a plane close by heard you talk, and you had such a southern accent at that time that he called and said, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Gadsden, Alabama. And I became, by the way, instead of Spooky 141 going in to talk to Bill at Kate, I became the Alabama boy. So I'd go in, I'd say, Hawk, this is Alabama. Come on in, let's get to work. And just by accident, she got that out of that book and called me about it, and I got in contact with him. And we talked over the phone several times, and then he came down to see some friends, I think, in Panama City. We drove over there and spent the afternoon with them. So that's how we got back together.
That's great. I was not aware that that's how they tracked you down. Probably didn't realize you had disappeared.
They couldn't find me. As we say, we were off the map or the grid.
So if Bill had hung on to those tapes, they wouldn't have had that reference.
That's right. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. It was good to see him and to shake hands and to talk to him. So.
Right. That's really all I had for you. If there's anything I've left out that you'd like to add, with your relationship to Kate or to Bill, or any feelings you have that way that you want to let be known, this is the chance to do that. Open it up to you.
Well, talking to them, it seemed like every time that we got into the area in early evening, the guys seemed to relax, and they would take naps, according to Bill, because they knew that Charlie wasn't going to do much with us up overhead. And one night I went in there and I called him up. I said, Hawk, do you know his full call sign was Chicken Hawk? Mm-hmm. And so everybody just said Hawk. And I called him up and said, we're outbound about 3 minutes till we be in your position. He said, I'm going to let you talk to my cohort here. His name, he's just got a new name. We call him Snoz, or Beak. Beak, they call him Beak. And I said, well, where did you get kind of a call sign like that, Beak? He said, well, he took a piece of shrapnel through the nose today. He said he's got a big hole through his nose, so we called him Beak. So it was things like that that kind of kept things on the light side.
Right. And who was Beak? Do you know his real name?
Don't know his real
I'll
name.
have to ask Bill who that was.
Don't know.
All right.
But that was some kind of an ordeal over there. I don't know if I could have survived it. I always thought I was bulletproof, but I don't know if I could have handled Kate or not on the ground.
Right.
That was a tough area. But Bill was up to speed. There he was, what, 21 years old,
Right.
first lieutenant or second lieutenant or something? Amazing.
And how old were you at that point?
I was 30.
Oh, okay. So you were a little his senior at
Yeah.
that point. So
Yeah.
You could tell Bill sounded young.
Oh, yeah, yeah. One thing, I kept records in my logbook of everything, all my career. And I went back and looked for Marvin when he came. Went back and looked, and we fired 48,500 rounds of 7.62 ammo over Kate. And I think we dropped 48 flares or something like that. It was something else. Another time, it was, I guess, the second night, Bill called and said, can you stay till after sunrise? And I said, why? He says, well, that little ridge over there to our left, he says, every morning at sunup, we get 4 rockets fired into Kate from that hill. And I said, they don't fire till sunup? He said, just at sunrise. I said, well, just a minute. The rest of the crew on the Spooky was listening to all the radio transmission, and they knew what I was fixing to say. And one of the loadmasters just spoke up and says, tell him yes. And so I called him back and I said, we'll stay. We went out to the west there, I don't know how many meters, out there, kilometers, 1 kilometer or so, and just went in orbit, waiting for sunrise to come up. And when it started to break, we turned and headed in towards that hill. Just before we got there, we saw 4 rockets come out of that hill towards Kate. We had saved 2,000 rounds of ammo. And I told the pilot, I said, you see that, where those rockets were fired? He said, yeah, I saw them. I said, let them have all 2,000. So we got into there and he put it up on his 30-degree bank. We put down 2,000 rounds and called Bill and said, we're going home. He said, okay. The next night we was over there, he said, we didn't have any problem that day. Said they were afraid to show themselves. They didn't know if you were still around or not. Said it was a quiet day. Everybody had a good day. So,
that's great.
but the funny part about that now is when we got back and landed, it was daylight. We got off the airplane, and the squadron commander was there. And he called me. He says, Al, come here. The rest of the crew took off. I went over and saluted and stood at attention. He chewed on me for 5 minutes. I've never been chewed out like that before. I've had people get upset and say, Al, you can't do that kind of stuff. You got to do this. Not him. He started off with, I can court-martial you. And he went on from there. After about 5 minutes of me standing there at attention and saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, he stopped and he says, if he wants you back and he wants you to stay and it's sun up, you're going to stay, aren't you? I said, yes, sir. He turned around and left.
Yeah. Well, you were making a difference.
Yeah, thought it was.
Well, I think you did. Certainly sounds like it.
I don't know what else I can tell you about Kate. The ones that were alive got out of there. I think Bill said that some of the Montagnards, the locals that helped them out, escaped through the jungle somewhere. Didn't go with them all the way, but I'm not sure. I'm just glad they got out.
Yeah. Well, I was amazed that I think they said they only lost one person, which is amazing.
Yeah.
On that E&E.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good. I don't know of anything else drastic about the deal over there with Kate. I just know that I had to be there.
Well, you were there for a reason. Maybe that was it.
Yeah. Hope so, anyway.
Yeah. Well, it allowed that reunion to happen 45 years later, so.
That, as Obama would say, that put the period on my Vietnam.
Yeah.
Brought it to a close.
So what happened after Vietnam then?
Well, I came home to a baby girl, first of all, and they sent me, let's see, that was 69. They were going to send me to Fayetteville, North Carolina to fly 130s up there. And I called Personnel Center in San Antonio and said, I want to fly Goonie Birds. I want to stay with the Goonie Birds. They said, no, Goonie Birds are phasing out. I said, you got to fly 130s. And I said, well, I don't want to go to Fayetteville. Where else can I go? And I had left the wife and the kids there in Fort Worth, Texas. And they said, well, we got a organization at Dykes, 150 miles to your west. And I said, that's where I want to go. So I went out there and spent 5 years out there. And from there, I got a call one day and said, we have orders. I said, where am I going? They said, Okinawa. I said, what kind of a unit? And they said, well, it's called a combat talent, but we don't know what that is. And I asked the old colonel there, I said, what is combat talent? He said, I don't know. Never heard of it. So we went to Hurlburt out here, Hurlburt Field, to combat talents in 75, and found out they were special ops also with their 130s combat talents. And I stayed with them till I retired in 84. So.
Okay. I have to ask you, I hope you don't mind me asking, I know, because you mentioned on the phone you were going to chemo.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Vietnam related? I just came from Ken Donovan, who says he's got a Agent Orange related leukemia.
Same with me. They don't know. They don't say it's the cancer that I have in my lung is because of Agent Orange. They can't say that because there's no way to prove it. But if you were in Vietnam at a certain period of time, you qualify for it because that's when they were dropping Agent Orange and all that stuff. And with us flying and flying low all the time, I was a good candidate, and sure enough, checked with VA, and yes, I qualified for a disability from them.
So that's all I have, and I think you did a fantastic job, and I appreciate you telling your story. I certainly appreciate your service, as I know all those men on Cape did. So thank you very much.
That, I will say this is off the record.
Sure.
I don't think you'll meet anybody that flew Spooky didn't think that was the best mission they were ever on.
Mm-hmm.
Not just from Kate, but just flying the Spooky mission. We trained EC, which is electronic warfare, HC, which is PSYOPs warfare, and AC, which is the gunships. All three of those C-47s, we trained them at Dykes, or at England Air Force Base. And the first 60 or 63 that we trained ferried an airplane over. And I have yet to hear anybody that didn't enjoy that Spooky gunship. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those in the EC and the HC wanted to be in the Spooky, but they were filled up. And it was wonderful that I got into them. I didn't have a choice. They sent me to them,
right,
which was fine with me. And I'll never forget the experience with that Spooky. It's funny, she's said when I retired she was going to put a C-47 in the backyard so I'd have something to play with.
Why'd they take them out of service?
They were old. There wasn't much they could use them for anymore, and we were not really in a war where there were troops in contact and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Plus, there was a buildup of the C-130 gunships. Okay. Now, the C-130s carried a 105 howitzer sticking out the left side and the back, and some of them carried 40 millimeters, and some carried 7.62s, and they had a big console there in the cargo compartment with all this electronic stuff, and they could figure the wind with it and do all of that to shoot that 105 howitzer. So that became the gunship thing. I doubt we'll ever have one that was designed for people mainly. That's what Spooky was designed for, troops in contact. Right. And we would get a call once in a while saying, hey, we got a convoy picked up trying to get into the South. Can you go slow them down till we can get a 130 gunship? We didn't have many then, just a few then. We'd go and we'd pester them with our 7.62, but their vehicles, they'd pile sandbags on them, so we couldn't destroy them. But the 130 would come in, because they'd usually pull off the road and try to get under the trees. The 130 could come in and destroy them. And I can't remember, there was very few 130 gunships in '69. And they went by the name of Buick, mostly in Vietnam. And back here they were called Spectres from the squadron back here at Hurlburt. The 119s were called Shadows. The Shadow gunship and some of the others. Okay. So that was the three. The 119 was designed to replace us because they thought with that bigger body on that thing, they could carry more. They found out they couldn't even take off sometimes with the load.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they also found out they were not as reliable mechanical-wise. They would have more aborts nearly than the successful takeoffs. So this is off the record, of course,
no,
but
that's interesting. I think I'll tear this down and then just get a look at those pictures that you have.
Okay.
And
one day we was at the club up on the side of the hill at Fan Ring, and 4 or 5 hours sitting around having supper, and the guys next to us at the table were out of the 119s. Well, one of the